Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Happy Thursday, and I'm in a reasonably pleasant mood for a change. How about you?
Really? Look at how big the smile is. This is great. Okay, well, if you're in a good mood, I'm in a good mood. Maybe you're going to be in a good mood towards Biden because I know he's on your radar again. So tell the people what is fully on your radar.
Yeah, that's a big negative there. Negatory. Who is most responsible for the Biden White House's desperate and undemocratic efforts to shield President Joe Biden's cognitive decline from the people? Well, two very different sources have reached the same conclusion. Former First Lady Dr. Jill Biden is perhaps the chief villain of the story. That is according to Original Sin, the new book by mainstream journalists Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, and also according to David Hogg, who was recently recorded by conservative undercover journalist network Project Veritas. Let's start with Hogg. The following video footage comes from Project Veritas, right-wing media group founded by James O'Keefe, though he was eventually ousted from it. Project Veritas specializes in obtaining surreptitious recordings of staffers who work in Democratic political organizing and liberal media and publicizes the things they reveal about their employers. Project Veritas obtained video of David Hogg, vice chair of the DNC, and also another Dem staffer, putting the responsibility for the cover-up on Biden's inner circle, particularly Jill Biden's chief of staff, Anthony Bernal. Let's watch this.
The bigger issue was like the inner circle that was around Biden. That's it.
And I can't stress to you enough.
Like Jill Biden's chief of staff, like had an enormous amount of power.
Jill Biden?
Jill Biden's chief of staff.
That was like an open secret at that. Like I would avoid him. Like he was scary.
What was his name?
Anthony Bernal.
I've never seen him.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
He's like a shadowy, like Wizard of Oz type figure.
So some thoughts. First off, look, it's not always necessary to record people without their knowledge in order to get the inside scoop. Hogg has actually been castigating the Democratic Party lately, as well as its failed electoral strategy, which has caused Gen Z, particularly Gen Z males, to move to the right. The DNC is actually trying to remove him from power in order to appease an irate Native American activist woman who thinks that his vice chair election was rigged against her, which is kind of crazy. I think he might have just honestly assessed what he sees as the problems with the Biden White House if he was asked about it in a straightforward fashion. But I digress. Now that's because it's not really a secret anymore. In fact, the Original Sin book, which I'm now most of the way through, chiefly identifies these same figures, Jill Biden and her chief of staff, Anthony Bernal, as the main bad actors in this sordid tale. According to Tapper and Thompson, Dr. Jill was initially opposed to her husband running for president, but after she got on board, she really got on board, and she took dramatic steps to protect him at all costs. Indeed, important decisions related to both governance and campaigning were made by an incredibly small group of top aides nicknamed the Politburo. These aides were incredibly loyal to the Biden family and humored the family's need for privacy and also secrecy. Bernal, the Jill Biden chief of staff, had tremendous power over personnel. Basically, you didn't go along with the approach, you were out of there. So when it came time to make the decision about whether Biden should run for re-election, well, that decision was made without any input whatsoever from pollsters or campaign consultants or Biden's cabinet, let alone the voters. It was made by the Biden family, who were in wild support of Joe seeking another term. You weren't allowed to question it. Frankly, it scarcely occurred to anyone that they should question it because you don't question Joe and you don't question Jill. This book, which I really recommend to people, it is fascinating to see just how shielded Biden was. I think I imagined a large number of people in on this conspiracy to keep Biden out of the public's eye. But it's actually just 3 or 4 people. Donlin, Ricchetti, Anita Dunn, and then Jill Biden and Hunter Biden. Keeping Biden away from the cabinet themselves. Cabinet secretaries, top Democratic officials couldn't get meetings with Biden. They did everything they could to limit his, not just his public appearances, but how many appearances he was doing with other leaders in the Democratic Party. And that decision came from Joe Biden himself and Jill Biden and these top people. And then the decision to run for re-election, they never sat in a room and decided, okay, here are the strengths and weaknesses of you having an additional campaign at this advanced age, with your age and inflation being top concerns of voters. They never had that meeting. Joe Biden and Jill Biden decided, well, of course he's running for re-election. That was told to these 3 or 4 people, and Ron Klain included. And then that was that. There was no polling even done. It's really astonishing how how insular this family, how much it's about protecting the Biden family. All these top aides viewed their role as that they were responsive, not obviously not to the American people, but not to the Democratic Party, but to the Biden family. It's a family affair. It's really interesting. I did not know the extent to which the Biden family had made protecting them, and then that explains all of the Hunter-related decisions. Really, why didn't they distance themselves from Hunter? Why didn't they ever throw him to the wolves? Why did they all show up to his trial? They didn't put any distance between them and Hunter as all of his legal episodes were unfolding. Well, from reading this book, I understand that never would have even occurred to them to do that because he's part of the family, and they protect the family. They were mad at other members of the family who were talking to the public. You don't betray the family. You don't talk to the public. You don't separate yourself from the family. And the most prominent member of the family being Jill Biden.
I love today's radar. I think this is brilliant. Let me tell you why. Conservative media should understand this was not some huge Democratic cover-up. This is what I've been saying. This was a chief villain that we're calling Jill Biden, but she's also a protective wife. So if you think about what she was doing, she's just protecting her husband, somebody who wasn't on board with the idea of it in the beginning, came fully on board, and then did not want him to get the criticism of not being able to lead because she's seen him in his lowest times be resilient. And she truly believed that he can do it again and wanted to shield him from any criticism because she thought that was a better option than President Trump. So that was a huge miscalculation by a loved one, not a huge Democratic cover-up. And I love that. I can accept that. We can look inwards and see what the problem was and just say, okay, all these people that were criticizing and bothering about this every day, Elizabeth Warren, others, they're not involved with this. They were shut out and iced out of the entire conversation, which I think should redirect a lot of the criticism of mainstream media and all these other, people that are on the chopping block for this, something that they had nothing to do with. They also were trying to figure out what was actually going on. Obviously, where there's smoke, there's fire. So something was going on, but because no one had access besides family members, you remember after that terrible debate performance, you know who Joe Biden went to Camp David with? His family members.
Right.
That's it. And NBC reported that they did a meeting about what the next step should be, and people were critical of, like, why would your family be the only ones involved in that meeting? And he said it wasn't for that. This is unequivocally false. But then we know he made the decision to drop out soon after that. I think that's what we have, is that family protecting family and not worried about maybe what's best for the country. So it was a gross miscalculation on their part, but not some huge cover-up. And I'm happy with that solution and to keep looking into it.
Huge in terms of consequential, maybe huge, not huge in terms of how many people were straightforwardly involved. Yes, you're right. Still think Democrats and Democratic leaders and the cabinet officials can be criticized for not going public for when they were repeatedly told you can't see Biden.
In the middle of an election season, you want them to criticize the person who was still on the ballot and risk losing. No one does that in politics. That's not an option. But a lot of people don't like Trump, but they're not going to criticize him once he's the option.
Sure, you could say it would have been bad politics. Maybe that's right. But also, and that's the other thing the book reveals, is that the concerns go back so much further than any of us thought. That basically, he aged 30 years when Beau Biden died, and he aged another 30 years when Hunter's plea deal fell apart, and there were warning signs, and yes, it's not like everyone in the Democratic Party knew how bad it was and helped keep that quiet. It was being kept quiet from them too. I wish they would have. I think they probably admit now they should have spoke up earlier, because of the disastrous end this came to right before the finish line.
Well, the reports were that Nancy Pelosi was actively involved in saying you have to step aside. Yeah, yes. But if she is one of the top Democrats that have been there for years, then you understand if for her it was that hard and it became public that she had a rift with Biden, you know how far people were trying to go to get in touch with him. Because what you want to do is start with the source inside of the party and not bring it to the news media outlets. Like, that would be a disaster in what was already a disastrous campaign for a second term. Coming up, President Trump's Liberation Day tariffs hit a major roadblock. We'll discuss next.